Hey everybody, welcome to the Wealth Advisory's Top 10. We're on, as you can see, to October 2024. We're actually filming this on the 1st of the month, which is unusual. We usually try and do it a couple of days early, but I don't know if you guys knew, but a hurricane came through. I was actually, well, my wife was in Tampa. I had been in Tampa like the day before the hurricane, flew out to go see an oil company. Like this was pre-scheduled. And this hurricane popped up, like, basically we were at the beach on Tuesday, and some lady from FEMA was there. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And she was like, oh, you didn't know there's a hurricane coming? It's going to be like a class or a category 4, you know? What? Yeah, so big hurricane. Baltimore was without power, was without internet, and we're finally back in action, back in the studio here. I drove up from Tampa. Like, I flew back in on Friday. They had the airport open back up. It was crazy seeing some of the stuff. Like, some of the beaches that we were at, like, a couple of days before were on the sidewalk now. Like, they were literally in the road. And coming up through North Carolina and South Carolina, Georgia was pretty rough. I mean, every hotel we drove past had no vacancy signs, you know. People from all over, you know, like the Midwest even, you know, Tennessee, Ohio. We were seeing tags from all over the place. I hope everybody that's watching is okay out there, and you know, I mean, obviously, if you're watching, you've got some form of power or internet, so you know, be thankful for that. There's a lot of folks that don't have that right now. But yeah, on to the markets, and man, there's a lot of stuff going on out there affecting the markets. Usually I do a recap of the month before, but I feel like we've kind of got to skip that this month because there's so much to talk about with what's going on right now, you know. So we've got economic reports coming out this week, which are going to, you know, influence the direction that the Fed takes with its rate cuts. I mean, not so much the direction, but the magnitude of the steps that it takes. So, you know, if job numbers are low, then, you know, you can sort of expect that the markets are going to be pricing in more of a chance of a bigger rate cut, another 50 basis points or 5%. But that's, you know, that's what I was planning on talking about. And then I came in, and on my way in, I was listening to Bloomberg Radio because, you know, that's exciting to me. And I was like, oh, let's hear about this dock workers strike. You know, what's going on there? And so they were talking about the dock workers strike for a little while. It's affecting basically the entire East Coast. Hopefully that'll be resolved in like a matter of weeks. But I had heard that as early as this weekend, railroads were turning away refrigerated goods because they didn't know if there'd be boats to put them on when they got there, you know, or people to put them on the boats, I guess you would say. So this should be interesting how that plays out. But then they interrupted coverage of that to tell us that Iran had launched missiles against Israel. So this is the second time. Back in April they had launched like 100 something.
Yep.
And it sounds like, I mean, from the initial reports, obviously there's a lot that goes on in the fog of war that you don't, you know, that's not entirely clear. But that this is a bigger one. So this is there's a lot going on right now.
Indeed.
A lot going on. You know, you kind of had to expect this after what happened over the weekend with Israel's incursion into it was Lebanon?
Lebanon, yeah.
Into Lebanon. And apparently this wasn't the first time that they've done that, just the first time that everybody found out about it. But anyway, I mean, you kind of had to expect that happening, and, you know, hopefully this doesn't escalate further, but, I mean, it has all the hallmarks of something that's going to escalate further. And we have been warning you guys that, like, anything could, like, oil's been getting crushed, but that, you know, literally anything could happen in the Middle East, and if anything does happen in the Middle East, that affects the price of oil. And so I'm sure you're going to be seeing the aftershock at the oil markets today. Anyway, with that being said, you know, I mean, I guess eventually I got to stop talking about current events and start talking about the top 10. So before we get into that, I just want to point out, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, this is a service that we provide for our paying subscribers, for the members of our community. So we don't feel that it would be fair to give out something for free that we charge other people for access to. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through our first 4 picks, and then we're going to cut this off on YouTube. But if you would like to see the rest of the picks, if you'd like to become a member of the Wealth Advisory, you'll get a lot more than just picks. You'll get weekly updates, monthly reports, new recommendations, access to literally all the research that we've got in our members-only website. We'll go ahead and put a link in the description below the video that'll get you to a discounted membership. I highly recommend you take it. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's well worth the money. We try and keep it really reasonable so that everybody can become a member. But if you don't want to, that's okay. We won't hold it against you. We'll keep putting these up on YouTube, the first 4 stocks, for as long as you want to watch. We just ask that you give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to make sure you get notified, and leave comments. And speaking of comments. We actually did get a comment on last month's video. Someone wrote in to ask if Keith Cole, one of our energy editors, would ever make an appearance here. And we talked about it, but unfortunately the table's kind of small that we sit at here. And between Jason, me, and my gigantic ego, there's really not much room for anybody else. But you can catch Keith in his podcast, and you can catch all of our other experts in the podcast, all on this channel as well. So I highly recommend you check them out. Everybody really has some great insights. It's really valuable content. You should really check all of them out. So you can find Keith in the podcast, but unfortunately we just, we can't fit anybody else at this table. It's a small table. Maybe if we get a bigger table in the future, we will extend the invitation.
If you guys subscribe to more newsletters, then we can
more
afford a bigger table,
equals a bigger table,
and then we'll bring
potentially.
So if that's an incentive for you, then work with us.
Work with us here. I like where your head's at.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so definitely check Keith out in the podcast. He's got a lot of really good things to say. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into our top 10. I, as usual, will go first with my first pick, which is, it's really funny. We were talking about what just happened over in Israel, and I think all of our picks this month are pretty lined up to benefit from that. And we had no idea. I mean, we obviously could guess, but didn't have any real intelligence that it was going to happen. We're not boots
Speak
on the
for
ground
yourself,
over
buddy.
there. I mean, maybe this guy is. Yeah. So my first pick, Barrick Gold, ticker GOLD, because that is what they mine. So this is actually my only pick for the month that wasn't up double digits last month. Everybody else has some serious momentum behind it, but Barrick really, it has momentum behind it too, because gold has momentum behind it. We've got lower rates coming. That's obvious. How much lower, we don't know, but we do know that lower rates equals a weaker dollar equals stronger gold prices. I mean, that is just, that's simple economics. That's the math of it. That's how it works. And we're heading for lower rates, weaker dollars, higher gold prices. And so year to date, this is the thing, we're already getting higher gold prices. Obviously, gold's hitting all-time highs now. It was like $5,700 or $2,700 for the first time ever. And so year to date, gold, the metal, is up about 30%, while gold, the ticker, is only up about 12%, right? So that's an imbalance, because, what Barrick sells is what's up 30%. So gold, I think, is still on the fringes of most investors' minds. And so most investors, are still, the ones that are looking into it are looking into the ETFs that invest directly in gold. But I still think it's a very fringe investment at this point. Unrest, obviously, is still a factor. I wrote this note way before I knew what was going on over there. And I just think it's a really great setup for outperformance here. Like I said, Barrick has been underperforming gold. I think that's going to change. Miners tend to outperform when the interest switches to miners. I don't think the interest has switched to miners yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to. And I think that there's going to be a stampede, basically, into gold mining stocks. Barrick, one of the biggest, one of the best known, should benefit from that a lot. So that is going to be my first pick for the month. And with that, let's see what Mr. Simpkins has for us.
Yeah, this is a standby for me.
It's a good one.
Yeah, Dubs talked about it. He talked about escalation, about things, getting worse in the Middle East, not better, and that's something we've obviously expected for a long time. We've been banking on this now here with a company, Northrop Grumman, among others, that have profited from this global escalation. Going back now to pretty much the invasion of Ukraine really is when things started to obviously get hot, and the first live firing war in Europe in 70 years. And then that was followed by obviously the terrorist attack in Israel, which sparked off what we've been seeing there for the past year now, which is a massive military response that has now drawn in Iran pretty fully. There's conflict now with Israel invading Lebanon. This whole situation it's pretty much what everybody feared. It's gotten to the point that, it's, again, you hate to sound like a broken record when you use the word escalation so much, but it's just gotten that bad. I don't know how many times you can say that shit's hit the fan, but that's where we're at with it. And Northrop Grumman is a great company. They obviously do a lot of traditional munitions, but specifically the past few years, they've locked down a lot of really big projects, specifically the Sentinel, which is going to replace the U.S. Minuteman missile, which are those big missiles we have in underground silos, part of our nuclear deterrence. They're replacing that. That's a huge project. They just got another one, and that's the glide phase interceptor. So one of the big problems we have right now with our enemy's missiles, specifically hypersonic missiles, is that they will actually go up into like low Earth orbit, glide, and then fire down on their targets. The problem there is that once they start firing down on their target, they're pretty much impossible to stop. So you need to intercept them. We're in that glide phase. So that's what Northrop Grumman's going to be working on now. They beat out RTX, which is another favorite of mine, to get this contract. They've already got $290 million for it, with more to come. And it's just another one of these big wins for them, and sophisticated projects, high-ticket items that are going to generate revenue over the next decade, really. So it's not even just short-term conflict in terms of ammunition and missiles and that kind of thing. These are long-term projects. However, in the short time, they did also sign a $745 million deal to produce light vehicle infantry ammunition to Lithuania. And again, we talk about Russia invading. A lot of those companies or those countries on the far east of Europe, on that eastern bloc of NATO, obviously concerned about what might happen if and when Russia does break through and fully invade Ukraine and win that war. Who might be next? If Russia might just keep going, or what the defense picture is going to look like for them going forward as this conflict in Ukraine grinds on. So there's a lot going on, specifically in Eastern Europe and the Middle East right now. And it all adds up to big business for Northrop Grumman, as well as, just in general, doing a lot of big-time defense stuff for the United States with a defense budget that is approaching $1 trillion.
There are a lot of reasons for that one to be a good standby there,
Yeah.
A lot of reasons there. So that brings us to our next one, and I am sticking with commodities really heavily this month. My number 4 pick is Freeport McMoRan, ticker symbol FCX. And so anyway, Freeport, like I said, the first pick of mine, gold, was the only one that wasn't up double digits last month. Freeport was up 14% last month. China, another factor in sort of the geopolitical issues there, is actually helping this stock a lot. And it's not a contractor. It's because of the government stimulus. It really stimulated investors last week and through the course of the month. And it's probably going to get bigger, let's be completely honest. I mean, the Chinese government, controls their economy, and their economy is not doing too well, so they're really desperate to fix things up because, the worst thing for an autocratic government is an unhappy populace.
Sure.
So if people are unhappy, they tend to be more likely to overthrow governments then. So not that I'm saying that that's going to happen in China or anything. I'm just saying that the Chinese government knows that that's a possibility, and that they're definitely going to probably increase their stimulus efforts. So also, we've got some more short-term to medium-term stimulus for copper prices because rate cuts. Right? Low rates, weak dollar, strong gold, strong other commodities as well, because commodities are all priced in dollars. So, you've got a lot of short-term stimulus here for copper prices for Freeport McMoRan. You also have the long-term bull case, which is actually getting stronger thanks to this increased interest in AI and AI investment, because these chips require a lot of power. And in order to transmit that power, there's one thing that you can use, and it's copper. You have to have copper lines to transmit this power. You have to have beefier copper lines when you have to transmit more power. So, we were already looking at this growing sort of deficit between copper supply and copper demand, and it's only going to get bigger. That really is going to add to the already growing demand for copper from, solar panels, from electric vehicles, from wind turbines, from nuclear reactors. I mean, literally everything. Everything that has to do with electricity needs copper, and we're making a lot of stuff that's electric. So there's a good short-term, medium-term, and long-term bullish case for copper and for Freeport, which is one of the biggest copper makers in the world. All right, so let's get Jason's next pick before we cut this off for those watching on YouTube.
Right.
Another good one, too, and another standby.
Yeah, well, here we have Leidos. which you might also recognize as another defense contractor. But Leidos typically works more in things like communications, IT, cybersecurity, that kind of stuff. A little bit more of a software focus than like traditional munitions. But one thing I also talk a lot about with defense companies, aerospace companies, is their involvement in the space sector, which is right now the biggest growth opportunity there is. And you're seeing them pile in, and you're seeing them net huge contracts and big deals that are pretty impressive. And Leidos just got one. They actually just replaced Lockheed Martin on this one. It's a contract from NASA to design work on the Artemis lunar rovers. So, you know, we talk about going back to the moon, which America is doing. We actually have another moon mission set for November. Down the line, we're going to start bringing rovers back on there. They're going to try to establish permanent presence on the moon. Leidos is going to be a part of that. It's a that follows a $476 million contract they signed with NASA to support cargo transfers to the International Space Station. So again, we talk about big deals. We talk about multi-year deals with long-term horizons, whether it's 5 or 10 years, you know, going forward, massive projects. And Leidos is another one of those companies that's doing it. And they're also another one of these aerospace companies that is really dipping into the space business, which I said is broadening. We're talking about trillions of dollars worth of money now to put up more satellites, more space structures on the moon itself, missions to Mars in the future. There's a lot of money to be had there with not just the United States, but other countries around the world ramping up their space missions, whether it's China or Russia, also visiting the moon and, you know, putting stuff up in orbit, weapons even. And so that's, you know, been another big tailwind for a company like Leidos. The company also, they report earnings on October 29th, towards the end of the year here. The last time they reported earnings, they increased their guidance across all measures. They've been topping guidance. They've been beating it. They're one of these companies that always seems to be ahead of analysts, ahead of Wall Street, and you're seeing their stock pop in the wake of those reports as a result. And I would expect to see that again this month with Leidos.
I like it. That's a great one. And that wraps up our first 4. So as I said, this is where we are going to cut folks off for those watching on YouTube after we do a little recap. But I highly recommend that you snag that discounted membership. You know, it's well worth it. You get a lot more than just the top 10. But honestly, the top 10 picks could pay for your annual membership, you know, in 1 month. Anyway, with that being said, let's do a little recap here. My first pick of the month, Barrick Gold, because there are a lot of tailwinds for gold, and Barrick has some catching up to do to the price of gold. I think that's going to happen. I think we're going to start seeing that soon as people start to get more interested in gold and gold miners. Next up.
Yeah, Northrop Grumman. Snowballing political crises, multiple live wars in major regions of the world. A great traditional defense contractor. You're going to get that full base of, you know, really exploiting the U.S. Defense Department's skyrocketing budget. Increased demand from Europe as well, which again we see with this deal with Lithuania here and all these other Eastern Bloc countries. So there's a lot working in Northrop Grumman's favor.
Yep. There are just lots of tailwinds for all the stocks this month. And speaking of those, next we've got Freeport, which has tons of tailwinds there too. Like I said, short term to medium term, you've got stimulus coming from the Chinese government. They're spending lots of money. They want to get their economy growing. And copper is benefiting from that. More short to medium term, you know, you've got rate cuts coming. Rate cuts mean a weaker dollar. Weaker dollars mean more expensive commodities. Also good for Freeport. And then long term, you know, we've got this copper, this imbalance, between demand and supply that we've been talking about for a long time, and it just continues to grow. AI is adding on to that. Basically, every new technology that we get excited about adds to that demand, that growing demand for copper, and that's going to make the imbalance worse. That's going to bring prices up, and that's going to be beneficial for Freeport. And finally, last but not least,
Leidos, yeah. Again, another company that dabbles in defense, but now increasingly dabbling in the space sector as well. Both really strong growth segments, and like I said, you're going to start to see more and more of these projects make headlines and really start to appear when you start putting rovers back on the moon. It's going to make headlines. People are going to take note of this kind of stuff in a way that I don't think they've quite really comprehended yet. So, I mean, I think Leidos has got a lot going for it.
Yep, definitely. All right, folks, there you go. Those are our first 4 picks. For those of you watching on YouTube, we're going to cut it it off right now. But like I said, we'll keep posting these as long as you want to watch them. There's a link to a discounted membership in the description below the video. I highly recommend you give it a shot, but if you don't, we'll keep posting them. Just keep coming back, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, drop some comments. You see we do respond to them, and check out those podcast episodes so that you can see why everybody wants to see more of Keith. And with that, we'll leave you. Thanks, as always, for watching. We'll see you next month.